Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on black. Back once again with another video that I think is very important. Unfortunately, there's a brother, Amir Locke, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was killed due to a no-knock warrant. Rather egregious behavior by the police there in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, in which, and I unfortunately saw the video in which they were serving a no-knock warrant. He was asleep on the couch, cover over his head. They came in. He didn't know who they were. He reaches for his firearm and they shoot him. And so I think this is an issue in which, of course, we see that the Second Amendment doesn't protect African Americans, doesn't protect black people, no matter what your nationality is. But I think this is also a situation in which we're seeing that some of the piecemeal offerings that we've been given from the power structure in terms of having a seat at the table. And I think you all are familiar with my position on having a seat at the table, which simply means that you are a black diner at a white establishment eating white food. And what is that white food that you may ask? I believe that white food, of course, is symbolic but not substantial political victories. That white food, of course, is white paternalism. That white food is rooted in, of course, multicultural initiatives rather than initiatives in which it actually benefits black people as a whole. And so I think it's also very important that we understand in this type of situation that what we need is power, and when do we need power? We need it now. It makes me think of the late, great Trinidadian-born, Bronx, New York raised, and of course Howard University educated Stokely Carmichael, who of course became the Prime Minister of Black America, as he was called during his heyday. And they had, of course, a march against fear. They were marching in Mississippi after James Meredith courageously sought to, of course, integrate the University of Mississippi. This is back in 1966, and they had that march against fear. Stokely Carmichael, after being arrested in Greenwood for setting up a tent in the grounds, but the state trooper said that he couldn't set up a tent. He said, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being beaten. I'm tired of being harassed. I'm tired of being arrested. What we need is power, and what we need is black power. And when do we need that power? We need it now. So this is a call, and I'm arguing that we have to have power, and we have to gain it now. It's unfortunate that another black person, law-abiding citizen, no criminal record whatsoever, legal gun owner, then next you know he's shot down. And what was even more egregious was the fact that, like I said, I watched the video. If you watch the video, you might be very upset, as I think most people are, was that the no-knock warrant was not to actually obtain a person, but to obtain property. Makes no sense whatsoever. And unfortunately, as a result of this, there's another black life that's been lost due to extrajudicial violence. And so I think it's very important, right? We've heard the stories. We've talked about black power. We want black power. Stokely Carmichael even said that Pan-Africanism was the highest expression of black power. Excuse me. And so I think it's very important. We need to talk about how do we gain power. And so I think based on my training and being taught by a Pan-Africanist from the continent, and of course even here in the deaf and defecants of the African diaspora, known as North America, believe that there's 4 key steps to power. And the first key step is we have to have key positions in government. So when many people think of it, they think of we're simply hiring black people to be politicians. We have the Congressional Black Caucus, and I've seen on Twitter today where people are arguing the Congressional Black Caucus needs to be disbanded. The Congressional Black Caucus needs to be canceled because they really are as worthless as the NFL Players Association in terms of them advocating for, of course, their players. That we see that with the Congressional Black Caucus and the lack of, I would even argue, the lack of fight that they have provided for, of course, their black constituents. But what we need, and I even wrote about this in my master's thesis, is we have to have individuals who are black-minded, who go into politics, not just for vulgar careerism, not to make a name for themselves or obtain wealth or to write a book and get national notoriety. Well, we have to have individuals who go into politics for the understanding that politics is the business of who gets what, when, where, and how, and that their job is to make sure that resources from the federal government, because we all pay federal taxes, are then taken and given to the black community. I think that's number one. Two, we have to organize our community. We know oftentimes, unfortunately, the only time our community typically is organized around any issue is when there's a presidential election cycle. And so we have to organize our community. That means we have to be a highly motivated community in which we understand that we have the collective and structural capacity to put things into action. This is essential action when we talk about gaining power. Last but not least, well, not last but not least, but the third step to gaining power is we have to build coalitions and alliances. This makes me think of the late great sociologist known as the Angry Texan, C. Wright Mills. In his book, The Power Elite, he talks about how the power elite work together. We're talking about the politicians, the military-industrial complex, and then, of course, multinational corporations work together to all acquire what it is that they want. They realize that they could get what they wanted. They could get it much easier and faster if they work together. And we have to do the same, not only within our community, but we even have to build a coalition of the willing, right? We know that America has the most powerful and wealthiest military throughout the world, in the world. However, America doesn't go to war by itself. When America invaded Iraq, and when America went into Afghanistan, even though they had a personal grievance, right, or political grievance with those nation states, they had a coalition of willingness, as then President Bush called it. And so we have to understand that we have to have individuals who are willing to be sympathetic and assist us in what we're looking to do. But we have to make sure that we're the ones calling the shots, right? We know oftentimes, unfortunately, due to the lack of political sophistication and community organization in our communities, when we work with other groups, they end up organizing us and having us working to their benefit and to their initiatives and making sure that their community makes gains politically, economically, socially, and otherwise, educationally, otherwise. We don't want that to be the case. And then last but not least, and this is something that we typically do first and we have to do last, and that's coercion, the use of force. And why this is important is because the ultimate negative power is coercive power, right? The capacity to impose one interest on another. What we tend to do is we go to this first. The first thing we want to do is we want to go out, we want to protest, we want to use this coercive power, but we don't want organized community. We don't have key actors in place, right, to actually speak and work to our benefit behind closed doors and positions of power. And then we don't build enough coalitions and alliances. And this makes me even think of, this is rather ironic because it's Black History Month, or as I always say, Pan-African History Month. We think of the late, great Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And in his seminal text, and if you haven't read it, please do, The Miseducation of the Negro, which was, of course, written in 1933, where he states in the book, I think it's chapter 8 or 9, protest only works if you have a structured, committed program in place. I'm going to say that one more time. This is Dr. Carter G. Woodson talking. This isn't the philosophy and opinions of Bakari Lumumba. This is Dr. Carter G. Woodson speaking in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, where he states protest only works if you have a structured, consistent organization in place. And so I would behoove everyone to, if we're going to do that, which most of us do, we have to do the first 3 steps first, which is, of course, have key figures in positions of power, particularly politically, organize our community, build coalitions and alliances, and then last but not least, use coercion if necessary. And so this is almost like if you're playing a game of chess. If anyone's familiar with the game of chess, you don't just attack with one piece. You have all your pieces work together. Then at the right time, you strike it. Then, of course, it's checkmate. A good example, when I would do training with children on the benefits of working together and gaining power, we would play the game of chess. And I would even show the scene for one of my favorite movies, actually, which was Independence Day. Came out in 1996, blockbuster film starring Will Smith. And there was a scene where the Jewish guy who was, went to MIT, but he was, floundering in a job, working with a cable company. He says it's like chess. You strategically organize your pieces, and then at the right moment you strike, and it's checkmate. And we understand that under the system of racism and white supremacy, when we look at the great work of the late great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in her groundbreaking book, The ISIS Papers, she talks about all 11 areas of human activity and how white people dominate us and everyone else in all 11 areas of human activity. And I would even argue, but you could juxtapose that to the analogy of what Black people being in a position in which we're like on a chessboard, and they strategically place their pieces in law, education, science, technology, war, sports, entertainment, to make sure that what they always come out on top of us. We would say for spades players, make sure that they set the deck every time. So 4 keys to power, very important. What do we want? We want power and we want it now. Unfortunately, Brother Amir Locke has passed and transitioned. But we have to understand that justice is not simply an officer being arrested, sentenced, convicted, and sentenced. We have to look at justice as gaining the structural capacity and power to prevent these things from happening to us, to prevent these abuses of our persons to continue to happen. I think that's what's most important. And to do that, we're going to have to gain power. And when do we want that power? We want it now. And I think it's very important that we have to understand that this is not something that can be done on an individual level. It's going to take the collective Black community to come together, to settle our petty differences, and make sure that we are not only preserving, but also ensuring that generations of Black life after we're gone and have transitioned won't have to suffer the indignities of anti-Black racism, not only here in America or in the Western world, but globally as well. So make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Until next time, peace.